Hello, hello. This is Peter Nelson with Nelson Insurance Advisors, and I am happy to announce we have a very special guest, Rafael Ortiz. How are you doing, Rafael?
Good. How are you? How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So,
Good.
Rafael Ortiz, if you don't know him, he is an author and writer, and Rafael has written several books, including Christopher Columbus the Hero, Defending Columbus from Modern Day Revisionism, Christopher Columbus the Hero Part 2, debunking the accusations that led to his arrest, Christopher Columbus and the Christian Church and why he matters to believers today, and last but not least, Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day, the truth behind the anti-Columbus movement. So that's why I wanted to have you on, Raphael. Um, I was just, no one else I don't think has really gone after it like you have in a way. And I'm just going to start off by asking you, um, what made you kind of go on this cruise, or I mean, not cruise, gosh, crusade in regards to defending Columbus?
Um, just one day I was on Facebook and I saw a meme claiming that Columbus was evil and that he was committing crimes against the indigenous people, and I never heard anything about it. So I went to my public library. I got the primary source of his first voyage, which is his journal. And from the first page, first line, I already knew that what they were claiming was not true. So I started a page on Facebook, which I still have, is called Official Christopher Columbus. And I started just for educational purposes. But then these things kept going on. Uh, I could see that it was everywhere, not just Facebook, but it was spread out on social media, YouTube. People were making videos against Columbus, making all sorts of claims. So I started to investigate who was behind it. I could not find a book, a modern day book, debunking the claims. So I decided to write my book, the first one, Christopher Columbus, the Hero. And one thing led to the other. And that's the way that I started.
Okay, very good. And so when did you write your first book? Just curious.
Uh, Well, as I say, I started with the Facebook. Facebook maybe was 2015 or 16. The first book I wrote it was published in 2017, which is the very first the year that the whole thing became national news, where people start to they start destroying the statues of Columbus, and the whole thing became national news. And I was reading that they were renaming Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day in many cities. But in 2017, that's when it became everything exploded. So my book was published in 2017, like maybe 1 or 2 months after the whole thing exploded on national news, which is by the way, that's what helped me to with my book, because at the time, I am not. I was, I'm not the famous writer. I'm not James Patterson or anything like that. And I did not know how I was going to promote my book, because most people don't read history books. That's why I wrote the book the way that it is. That was made purposely. It's not written like most people write history books. You just go and prove all the lies against Columbus wrong, and that's it.
Okay. And in all of your research and everything else, why do you think all of a sudden Columbus has become like this, just probably attacked more, I would say, than just about any historical figure out there? Why do you think that is?
Because he is the one who discovered America, and American history starts with him. And even though they don't say it, but I know it's because he was a Christian. He brought Christianity to the New World, and I think that they want to portray Christians as bad people, bigots, haters, who came racist, who came here to enslave people. And that's not just Columbus. They started with Columbus. Columbus was just the scapegoat.
Right.
And I was afraid that they would start with Columbus and move with other people. And I even made questions about it on my first book. And I was right, because then they started with Columbus. And a few months after they started vandalizing the statues of Columbus, then they moved with the Confederates. And then they moved with George Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson and so on. So I was right, and that's why they're doing the same too. It's not just Columbus Day; they're trying to rename Thanksgiving Day as on Thanksgiving Day. So that's when I knew, that that was not about Columbus. Columbus is just an excuse, and they made the same claims that about Columbus with the Pilgrims. They say that the Pilgrims came here to bring slavery, racism, sickness, disease, plagues, and all that stuff.
Okay. And so let's really dive into this um, understanding Columbus, because I think we let the narrative. A lot of people just allow the narrative to be taken down one way, and we just you hear it as I was taught a long time ago. If you're told a lie 1,000 times, after a while, it starts to become the truth, right? So let's dive into understanding Columbus. First of all, how did his how did Christopher Columbus's Catholicism really influence his life?
Well, he was a Christian, so one of his main motivations was to bring the gospel to the lands that he would discover. And Queen Isabel, she was also very religious, and that was also her project with Columbus. It was more her than King Ferdinand, and she wanted the same thing, to bring the gospel. At the time, they thought that they were bringing the gospel to the Indies, which back then it was the name for not just India but China and Japan and Asia. And Columbus was inspired by the writings of Marco Polo, who have visits China, and he or his father, they were trying to bring missionaries to the Great Khan, which is the king, to bring the gospel to them, but they never, that was not possible. So that's why Columbus, a few hundred years later, he wanted to then do that just to bring the missionaries to the Great Khan. But we know now that he was not in China or Japan. He was actually in a new world, a new continent in between Europe and Asia. And that's what the discovery also means in that context, that Columbus discovered America.
Right. And some things I've heard from some other historians that sound like they were more um, not trying to distort the truth. From what I've read in the past was that yes, one of Columbus's main concerns was the salvation of souls, right? Spreading the gospel, as you say. And two, I've heard also that he was hoping to raise some money to potentially do another crusade, maybe to recapture the Holy Sepulchre in the Holy Land. In your research, have you found any truth to that?
Yeah, he mentioned that a few times too. Uh, yeah, yeah, but it was mostly to bring the gospel, and that's what he was doing too.
Okay. So let's separate some of the facts from fiction. You
Mhm.
know, um, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions with Columbus that if we don't of course have all night, but if you could just give us a couple that you would say you know, you have to battle with the most often when you're defending Columbus or talking about him?
Uh, the first one is not it's not a big one, but once in a while, there is a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and people claim that he was, anything but Italian. Some people think that he was Spanish or Portuguese or Polish king, or whatever, but he was Italian. And I myself, I am not Italian American, so I don't have an agenda. Uh, I am from Puerto Rico, which is an island that he discovered. The people from Puerto Rico, we have indigenous blood. That's one of the reasons I started to study Columbus, because my understanding was that he was a friend with the indigenous peoples that we call Taínos that he met in the Caribbean, and I was curious about that. So that's another thing, that he was a friend to the Taínos. He was not enslaving people left and right, like some people claim today that he was doing. He did not invent slavery. Slavery was universal. Everybody back then practiced it in every continent of the world, including the indigenous people. He was not a racist. He was then very bad at it, because he one of his motivations was to bring the gospel to people of a different race.
Right.
And I am grateful about that, because again, as Puerto Rican and we have indigenous blood, now we are safe. Now we believe in God, the one and true God. But it's mostly about that. They talk about he enslaving people, that he was mistreating the natives, that he was cutting their hands. That it's a lot of nonsense. Most of it is just made up. They even say that he was a pedophile, which is not true, and it's ridiculous. And some of the stuff that they use are misquotes or things that they are making up.
Okay. And one thing I've heard, and I thought I'd ask you, is I've heard that Columbus was trying to baptize as many natives as possible, actually to prevent them from, because there was a law back then, if they were baptized, they couldn't be enslaved later on. Is there any truth to that?
During the third voyage, the colonists, he was a governor of them, the Spaniards, on the island of Haiti, or the Hispaniola, and that's when most of the story happened. And they were not happy with him, and one of the things that they were complaining about Columbus was that he kept the native from baptism, so he could keep more of them as slaves. And that's, of course, is ridiculous. And also, the whole thing was political. These mutineers, rebels, Spaniards, they were just playing politics. They just wanted him to be removed from office, and they were successful in doing that. During the third voyage, they sent him, with chains, and his brothers too. They removed him from office, and they sent them to Spain. But that backfired on them, because then the people who made the charges against them were charged with mutiny, and the king and the queen did not believe the charges anyway. There were many charges, like the one that we are talking about, but they also say that they were mistreating the Spaniards, that they were punishing the Spaniards for little things, which is not true. And that's what my last book is all about. It's about those claims. But even one of the most controversial primary sources of the day, his name was Bartolomé de las Casas. He was a priest, and he also disproved that claim that Columbus was doing that. All that Columbus said about baptism and the natives was that he wanted them, that he wanted to make sure that they understand what they were doing. because if you baptize somebody who doesn't know what he's doing, then that would be um, I forgot the name of the word, but it was not good to do that. It was not right. So and Bartolome de las Casas, he agreed with Columbus, and he was a priest too. So he was not keeping. That's not true. That he was not keeping people from baptism. He just wanted then that they that they could understand what they were doing, and then they could be baptized.
Okay. And I hear often that he was an amazing navigator and a leader, and at the same time, his governor skills, let's put it that way, were were lacking. From all of your research, from looking at him from the governor's side of it, or when he was, administering the lands that were under him, how would you say he was as a leader from that perspective?
Most uh, scholars, even the ones that like Columbus, they would say that he was a good, awesome explorer, but he was a bad politician. But I disagree with that, because what they mean by that is because they're talking about that rebellion where he was removed from office. So they say, well, he could not control them. So that's the reason why he was a bad administrator or governor. But that was the way that things were back then. And in one of my books, I asked the question, so then give me a name of who was a good governor at the time. And I asked questions. Who was the Bobadilla, who is the guy who replaced Columbus, and he was the person who he was just playing politics with Columbus, and he mistreated the natives too, and he was removed from office for doing that. And then or was the next one Obando, Nicolás de Obando. Nicolás de Obando was known because he was a cruel man. He is the one, and that, yes, there were mistreatments, but that was not by Columbus. It was by Nicolás de Obando. And so was he a good governor? Or maybe the other people, and I gave many examples, like Juan Ponce de Leon, he was removed from office too, but then he went back though to office. Or was Vasco Núñez de Balboa?
Let me
Yes, go
stop
ahead.
you real quick. Wasn't it Ponce de Leon was on, what was it, the third on one of the missions, on one of the trips with Columbus, and then ended up
Yeah, he was on the second voyage with
second
Columbus,
voyage?
and
Okay.
yeah, and he became the first governor of Puerto Rico. He discovered also Florida, but that's politics back then. People, it's like today, but the only thing that they were doing back then that they don't do today is kill one another. Because I was going to say that Vasco Núñez de Balboa, he got hanged, and Pizarro, they slit his throat, and I think the other Pizarro, they were two brothers, they killed him, and there were many things like that. It was the time, and people would poison one another. There was back then a lot of political drama and a lot of backstabbing, but in the literal sense. That's the way that it was back then. So Columbus he was not a bad governor. He was just the victim of a political coup. And that was normal back then. That's what people used to do back then. So
Right.
he was not a bad governor, and I prove it because the letters that he wrote to the king and queen, and they say that he was doing good, and they say basically, congratulations, you're doing very good. There were people who were with him in that voyage. I mentioned their names in my book, and they say that he was doing a good job. So he did. I mean, every time that there was a problem, he would find solutions too.
Okay.
So the fact that he was removed from office means nothing. That was just the politics of the time. And then again, as I said, he never went he never was dry, and he even made another voyage after that, a third voyage, he was allowed to make one more voyage too.
So how many voyages did he make altogether?
Four.
Four voyages. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And another thing that I hear occasionally, as a matter of fact, I just heard it recently on a video. They really try to make it sound like he was going to get 10% of the treasure, to make it sound like, one, that was a bad thing, and two, to make it sound like he was just money hungry and it was all about the treasure and it wasn't about anything else. Would you mind elaborating a little bit on that?
The deal is that his work was not a work of charity, and there is nothing wrong with being paid by your work. Also, Columbus, everything that he was doing at the time was the things that everybody was doing at the time. In other words, Columbus was a man of his times. Uh, it's just that people don't read history. For example, when he went to the king and the queen of Spain, and he made his proposal, he said that, as explorer and discoverer, if he was successful, then he wanted to some titles as governor, viceroy, and so on of every island that he discovered, and he would have certain amount of money. And his father-in-law, he actually was also a discoverer, and because Columbus, he lived for some time in Portugal, and Portugal, they were discovering places, uh, like in Africa and other places and islands close to Portugal too. And that's what they would do. They would discover something, and if you discover and you were the leader, then you will be like a governor, and then you will have certain amount of money. So Columbus was doing what he learned from others. Yes, he asked for a lot of money, more than his father-in-law and other people, because he was doing something more risky. There
Right.
was no guarantee that he was going to make it.
Yeah.
So
The likelihood
once
of
he
him
made it,
the likelihood of him dying was probably pretty high, right?
yeah, and he suffered many. He almost didn't make it. He left with 3 ships on the first voyage, but he returned with 2. Most people don't know that, and he almost
Which one did he lose?
Santa Maria.
Oh, so he lost his main ship then.
Yes, that was the biggest one too. So that's why they left 39 men on the island of uh, La Española, and but they were all murdered too. That's another story.
Right.
That's something that he found out when he returned back. Everybody got killed. But
And
yeah, I mean, he was.
were they
Yes.
killed by the Caribs, or were they killed by another tribe, or
That was in the island of Española. Columbus made friendship with one of the chief. Back then, there were like 6 kingdoms on that island, and he made this friendship with this chief named Wakanagari, and he promised him that he would protect him from his enemies. And that's what people used to do back then. They would make alliances just to fight a common enemy. And the Taínos, that's the name of those who live in the Caribbean islands, they were terrorized by the Caribs, and that's where the word Caribbean comes from Caribs. That's also where the word cannibal comes from too, because they were cannibals,
really?
and they would raid all the Caribbean, and they would plunder, kill, rape. Sometimes they cannibalize entire islands. They did a lot of bad things. So that's why Columbus made an alliance with Wakanagari. He left, then he returned back. He found his 30 men dead, and they suspect that maybe it was Wakanagari, but it wasn't him. It was one of his enemies, and his name was Kaonabo. And Kaonabo, even though he was one of the chief of the island, one of the 6 chiefs, he was a Carib. He was born a Carib, so that might explain his hot temper. And Eventually, like a year or year and a half later, Columbus fight him, or at least he fights some of the allies of Caonabo. Once Wakanagari asking for the favor. Columbus never used violence against anybody unless it was the last resort, or in this case, he was asked by his friend to fight Caonabo, and they had an interest because Caonabo, he not only killed those 39 men, but he actually decapitated 20 more Spaniards after Columbus came back, and he tried to do a lot of things, tried to kill Columbus and more of his men, and but he helped his friend Wakanagari to fight Caonabo because Caonabo also killed one of Wakanagari's wives, because back then they were like the chief. They have many wives, and Caonabo killed one of them and kidnapped another one. So he asked Columbus, "Would you help me to fight him?" And he said yes. So he fought the guy, or at least his ally, and he eventually captured Caonabo and sent him to jail to Spain.
Okay. But that doesn't sound like, I mean, anything any different than alliances that, that we would even see today almost, right? We make
Yeah,
alliances with countries to fight another common enemy.
and even in that case, Columbus was looking to see if he could change their minds too. He wanted Caonabo and the other people to be his ally. Like he said, he even told them, I will release you. Just go to Spain. And some people think that maybe he wanted that he see Spain and see how awesome it was, and maybe he would come back as an ally. The only reason that never happened is because the ship sunk. And everybody died on that ship. So that's why that never happened.
Okay. So the whole story is about how Columbus just loved to ship the natives to back to Europe and enslave them. I mean, is there any truth to that, or?
Uh, Columbus made, as I said, he made a promise to Wakanagari on the first voyage that he would protect him from his enemies. So when Columbus came back with his second voyage, he was capturing the Caribs, and he would send them as prisoners of war. And that's the quote unquote slavery to
Okay.
Spain. And then when that happened, that situation I just told you on Hispaniola, Columbus also helped other tribes to fight, because that's what people used to do. They would make alliances again, and
Right.
he was allowed only to quote enslave those that were enemy combatants. However, Columbus sent a letter to the queen. He said that he wanted them that they would be treated well, because they want uh, that they would that they would become Christians. He wanted them not to be involved with cannibalism, those who were cannibals, and he wanted that the Spaniards treat them well. And also, he had said several times that he would bring them back to freedom. And also, we know, because he wanted them that they become Christians, that means that also he was looking somehow that they would be free again. So the so-called slavery was even not permanent, but for a time. But it
So
was because of that situation that happened, between all these tribes on the island of Hispaniola.
so even for the enemy that were sounds like a bunch of cannibals,
Mhm.
it was still the hope that at some point they would become Christian and be free again.
Yeah,
Okay.
and even the queen, she was not even in agreement with Columbus,
Really?
and she let them free. She let them free too,
Okay.
because Columbus asked, just give me 2 more years, because there was a big mess on the island. just not because of the tribes, but also because of the mutinies and all that stuff. But she let them all free, and that's it. It was, she's the queen.
Right.
So there was no, people, as they want to portray Europeans as enslavers, but that's not history.
Right.
And not every slavery was the same either.
Right.
People
And
think about kidnappings. That's what people think about when they think about slavery, but that's not the way that it was back then,
right.
necessarily.
And as you said, sounds like the local natives, the Caribs, were actually doing that same exact stuff, if not worse, with practicing cannibalism on the other tribes, right?
They were doing worse because they they would kidnap the woman, and they would put them on an island for them. They would visit the woman. They would visit the woman once in a while to have sex with them, and if the woman was pregnant and have a baby, they would eat the baby. They would kill all the men on the islands. The young boys they would castrate, and they would fat them up so they can kill them and and then eat them. So they yes, they were doing by the standards of any time, they were doing the worst. And that's just the Caribbean. If you go then, and I talk about that on my third book, Mexico and the continent, they were doing worse because they have the Aztecs, they have even uh, markets for slaves, so they can sell them, so can people can sacrifice them for their idols. Because the Aztecs, they have like us, they have holidays, but their holidays were all about human sacrifices. Many of them, like on some holidays, they would sacrifice women. Others would be all older people. For some ceremonies, they would sacrifice babies. Like if they were like on a famine, they would sacrifice babies so the gods can bring rain. So they were doing a lot of bad things, and most people don't know that.
And I think a lot of people that are trying to they want to have a certain narrative. They don't want to talk about that, right? They just want to make it sound like the Europeans were these evil colonists and, you know, that's it. Um, do you think it's really to me, I'm pretty sure it's like this, it's a Marxist mentality, really. Would you agree with that?
Yes, one of the main persons behind all these history revisionism, his name was Howard Zinn, and by his own admission, he was an anarchist, and many of the people who follow Howard Zinn, they are on that kind of politics or similar. They are either Marxist or anarchist, or they hate America, and they're using propaganda. They try to divide people. They want to put indigenous people against Italian Americans, black people against white people to fight each other.
Right.
They don't have good intentions at all, and they're not doing anything good for our nation. What they are doing is just spreading lies and then destroying statues, vandalizing places, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads me into this last part before we chat about your books a little bit is really I mean, why do you believe Columbus matters so much today? Because I look at it and I think, my gosh, Columbus probably matters more right now, what he stood for than any other time, just about.
Before I answer that question, let me tell you that that kind of, nothing is new. All this propaganda is not new. It have a name. It's called the Black Legend. Uh, I call it the New Black Legend, though, but it's called the Black Legend or the Spanish Black Legend, meaning it was a propaganda against Spaniards, where the people they portray Spaniards, all Spaniards, as evil, But then the other side of the propaganda is what is called the myth of the noble savage, where all the Indians were portrayed as angels. And that started back then. And but now they're using that propaganda now against Columbus because yes, there were bad Spaniards over there. That's why we know because people wrote about it. But they use it as propaganda. Other countries, other Europeans, they use it against Spaniards. And
And
but now they're
I think you're referring to real quick is that back then you of course had the big competition between England and
yeah,
Spain, right? They were the
yeah,
two main powers. So a lot of this really came from the Anglo world, the attacking of the Spanish speaking people, right?
yeah. But now they're doing the same thing. It's just the same. Indian good, European bad. But
Mhm.
now they started again with Columbus. As for your question, yes, Columbus matters because he for everything. We are here because of him. We're speaking English or Spanish because of him. That's he discovered America. The name of America is because of him. And America also includes not just North America, but South America, Central America, the Caribbean. The gospel is here because of him. The New World is mostly Catholic or Protestant and not Muslim or Buddhist like the Old World and other religions. All that is because of him. Civilization came because of him. Uh, like I'm talking about like universities, uh, churches, hospitals, and so on. Science, anything. You cannot separate Columbus from America. It's impossible. Even from if you are indigenous person, you cannot even separate Columbus from that because yes, Columbus called an Indian, but also if you call yourself Native American, you have to remember that that name came because of Columbus. And everybody's Native American anyway. We are all Native Americans. But also Columbus is the one who introduced the civilizations that he discovered of, the Taínos, the Caribs, and then other explorers. They introduced all these civilizations of natives like the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayas, and so on. All that because of Columbus, because of the art or the science of archaeology or history, anthropology, and so on. So you cannot separate Columbus from anything. That's why he's important. Even he's so important that uh, many places, even though it should have been called Columbus or Colombia, not America.
Mhm.
But at least we have a lot of places named after Columbus everywhere. Like in Canada, you have British Columbia. In the United States, you have Washington, D.C., which is the District of Columbia.
Right.
There are many places named after him. Like I
Columbus,
live in
Ohio.
yeah, South Carolina. I live here in South Carolina. Is Columbia, South Carolina. In
As a
South
matter
America,
of fact, I'll mention just a quick little plug. That's an award I won from Columbus Life Insurance Company based in
yeah,
Cincinnati, Ohio. So, and they actually still have the Santa Maria as their logo, which I'm glad to see because, most companies by this time would have gone away from that. And I give Columbus Life and Western and Southern, who owns Columbus Life, credit for,
mhm.
continuing to have the name and the logo and all of that. But anyways, continue.
And also there is a country in South America named Colombia, and that's because of Columbus. When the United States became independent, South America wanted to do the same. So you have in the north, the United States of America, the South wanted to rename their all the states, independent states from Spain. They wanted to be called the United States of Columbus or Colombia. But then, eventually just it was just Colombia, the country of Colombia.
Right,
So yeah, that's why I mean Columbus is very important. And we are here because of him, as I said already.
right. So with our last 15 minutes or so, I want to ask one more question about that, then we'll start chatting about the books. But we've talked about how Columbus, they started picking on Columbus first. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Rafael, but one of the companies I represent is the Italian Sons and Daughters of America. And recently they helped battle in, for example, Philadelphia. They won a big court case there. I don't know if you heard about that one, where it looks like the Columbus statues are going to be allowed to stay up and all of that. So there has been a couple of victories. But what I wanted to ask you was, okay, they picked on Columbus first, and yeah, they've gone to all the Confederate generals, and they've done all this. Where does it stop, do you think? I mean, do you think they're ever going to stop trying to cancel culture, or do you think they're never going to stop?
No, they're not going to stop. So that's why we need to stop them. If you don't stop them, they won't stop. And that's what we're doing. That's why I do what I do. I'm trying to inform people, and groups like the Sons of Italy, they are fighting back, and other Columbus groups are fighting back. That's the only thing that we can do, and educate people too, so they know the truth, because they're not going to stop.
Okay. So let's talk about the books real quick. And my copies, I wanted to have them by now, but they're on the way. So maybe in a month or two, and I get a chance to read one or two of them, I'll have you back on, and we'll just chat about the books after I can make some notes. But if you wouldn't mind here for a little bit, just go into each book a little bit, maybe just summarize quick for us. And I'll just mention real quick, by the way, they are all on Amazon. And I will make sure when I put this video on YouTube, I will make sure to put links for them on there. But they're all on Amazon. They're very affordable. They're all roughly, I recall, about $10 to $15 a piece, somewhere in that range. But I'll let you summarize in our last 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, Rafael, just summarize each book for us.
Okay, so the first three books are standalone books, meaning you don't have to read the first one in order to understand the second or the third one. You can read my second book without reading my first or the third one. My first book is Christopher Columbus the Hero. The second, that was published in 2017. 2018, I published the next one, which is Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day. And the third one, 2019, Christopher Columbus and the Christian Church. In 2020, I took those three books and I made revised and updated versions of them, all of them. Now in 2023, actually it's 2024, but in 2023, I actually made another update, but it's basically the same version as 2023, except that I did some, like a reformat. Maybe I added one or two new lines, but that's it. If you have any question about my first book, if you notice, if you look like the old books, and I recommend that you buy the books new, because if you get the new versions from Amazon or Kindle, you will have the most updated versions of all of them. So, but if you were to buy, let's say you buy one of my, the first book, you will notice that there are like three different book covers. And I'm going to explain quick what happened. I published my first book with a book cover where you can see half of Columbus's face and here the chest, and that's the original version. Then I made the same book, but with another book cover, and it's based on a painting, but it's just, again, like this time it's the face and a little bit of his chest again. That one, just the difference is it's the same book like the 2017, but I just added, because on the first book I put my personal email address on the back of the book. Then I decided to become like full time with this thing about Columbus. So then I changed. I started this website called officialchristophercolumbus.com, and I added also a Gmail as officialchristophercolumbus@gmail.com. So that's basically why you have two different. And the third one is the one that I'm using right now. So, but then in 2023, last year, I wrote another book. It's called Christopher Columbus, The Hero Part 2. So let me explain what each book is all about. The first book is the one that is the most important of all of them when it comes to debunking the lies against Columbus.
You're saying the Hero Part 1.
Yeah, the Hero Part 1. And also that one is available in Spanish too. And and that's why I translated in Spanish, because it's important. And as I said in the beginning, I didn't know how I'm going to introduce this thing about Columbus. In the beginning, I thought I was the only person fighting for Columbus. I did not know anything about the Sons of Italy or the Knights of Columbus. I thought I was alone. So that's why the book feels a little bit sometimes, that I'm kind of frustrated at points and stuff like that. Also, I use like a conversational style of language. I want it to be very simple to people. And there is a lot of passion in the book, but there is also a lot of primary sources that you can find. And I even tell you in the books where to find those sources, and even for free. So that's the one that is very important, because it debunks all these things about Columbus being racist, a rapist, a pedophile, and talking about slavery and all the stuff. Then the second book, Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day, continues where the other one left, because that one is more about I talk about Washington and Jefferson, and I talk about the anthem, because they say the American anthem is racist. And, I mentioned some of those points, and I just disprove them with primary sources. I also wrote that book because at the time I was trying to edit Wikipedia, and I could not do it because they put like some kind of virtual lock. So I decided to make my own biography of Columbus at the end of the book. And also that biography is also available on my website. And I talk, also I talk about Columbus Day, how it came to be, and other holidays that we celebrate. Then the last book, or not the last book, but the third book, Christopher Columbus and the Christian Church. That book is the one that I usually say that is the one that is the only book that I wrote that is normal. Because as I said, you will see a lot of passion in my first book, and my second sometimes have some sarcastic comments here and there. But the third book is more like normal. And as I was reading the stories of Columbus and how he brought Christianity to the Americas, I was thinking, well, these stories would make a book, an awesome book. Because most people, they start the story of Christianity in the Americas with the Pilgrims, but Columbus came first, and that's why I started a book. And I also wrote in the introduction of the book that if you're not a Christian, you should not read that book. You won't like it, I think, because like other authors, I am a Christian, and I believe like Columbus. I believe in God. I believe in the Bible. I believe in the second coming of Christ, which he also believed. I believe that he fulfilled prophecies. He believed of himself that he was fulfilling prophecies on the Bible. I believe all that stuff. So that's why I wrote it. So there are stories about Columbus, and then about the other people that came, like including the other explorers that I don't remember right now, and so on. The stories are awesome. I love that book because of that, because of the stories. Then the last book that I wrote, I published it last year, Christopher Columbus, The Hero Part 2. And that one is the only one that I will say that you have to read the first one before you read the second part. Unless you are somebody who really knows the story of Columbus. Because if you read it, you will be lost. You will be confused. There is a lot of names. There is a lot going on. So, and I name it that way because if I, for example, name the book Christopher Columbus versus Francisco de Bobadilla, most people would not know who Francisco de Bobadilla was. So that's why I name it Christopher Columbus the Hero Part 2, because in that way, those who have never heard about my books, they would know that there is a first part. And those who know about my job, my prior work, then they will know that there is a new book. That's the reason why I name it that way. And that book is about the dossier, because in the 2000s, some Spanish people, they found the dossier that the political enemies of Columbus used against him during the third voyage to remove him from office. And anybody who have read the story, we know that he was removed. The charges were false. Some of the primary sources they mentioned just little bites of what was in the dossier, but none of them transcribed it. They thought that it was not worth it. So, but somebody found it and they published it in Spanish, in a book in Spanish. And what I'm doing on my book is like a refutal of what they wrote, because even though they are historians, the people who published the book, they believe the claims.
They believe the people that were conspiring against Columbus is
Yes. And their theory is that if just because we found it, that means that it's true. But I say in my book, okay, that's like saying, okay, we found in a book or something that somebody wrote about Jesus when he was crucified, and that's historical, so that means he was guilty. And you can do the same with anybody throughout history, Joan of Arc, anybody, saint, hero, whatever. There are many people who have been slandered throughout history. That doesn't mean because you found that document that means it's true. But also, there is only one English speaking writer who wrote only 3 pages about the dossier. The dossier is very long. It's like 45 pages long or something like that. So what I did, I made my own kind of like translation into English, because I'm writing for English speaking people, so they can see what's in it. So this book is the only book that you will see in English that have the whole thing, and then each chapter follows a refutal by me. And also you can see you don't even need me. You will see a lot of things that they are contradictory, don't make any sense, lies and stuff. And even the historian who published the book, the original book, they even admitted that yes, they know that some of those people, they were not good people, they were bad, they were thieves, they were whatever, they have bad intentions, but they still believe in some of the stuff. So that's what that book is all about, the last one.
okay. And I'll just ask you, out of all 4 of them, which one do you personally like the best?
I know that the first one is the one that is the most important, but I like the stories of the third one, the one about the Christopher Columbus and the Christian Church. On the fourth one, the last one, I felt good because I guess I grew as a writer, and I guess I did. I mean, even somebody I sent one of the copies to another guy who writes books about Columbus and stuff like that. He said the same thing, that the book is like the best written book that I ever have so far. But I still like the third one because of the stories of Christian, being the gospel. That's what I like the most, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Well, Rafael, I thank you so much for this. I know we're hopefully when I get my books and get a chance to read them, I'm going to have you back on here, as I know I'm going to have a ton of questions, and I think these books are very special, and I think we need to get the word out, of course, as much as possible. And I just want to do a quick shout out to all the other some of the organizations we already mentioned that do also defend Columbus: the Italian Sons and Daughters of America, the Knights of Columbus, who I am a 4th degree member of. I want to thank the Knights for, of course, they're named after Columbus, but they've also done an amazing amount of good to defend him. And any other organization, I know there's a bunch of, outside of yours, I know there's a bunch of others. With a couple minutes left, do you have any other organizations you want to mention real quick, Rafael, that you can think of that I missed?
I've been a member of the National Christopher Columbus Association. for several years.
Okay.
I guess you mentioned, Sons of Italy. I was recently at Pueblo, Colorado, with the Sons of Italy over there. There are other, I don't remember, the Italian American podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
there are
And
many, yeah.
I will say, let me just I will say about the Italian Sons and Daughters of America. One of the things why I love representing them, as being my firm is we're independent, so we represent multiple companies. But what I think is so special is when you take out, whether it be one of their life insurance policies, retirement annuities, or something like that, because they're 501(c)(8) not for profit, they can't keep the profit. So portion of that money they will end up giving out to fight some of these battles, these lawsuits, and to create publications to defend Columbus and stuff. So even though I guess I'm being a little salesy in a way, which I have no problem doing, being an insurance professional, I will say if you have the choice, you can give money to X company that they're going to take the profits, and they might actually be working against some of the beliefs that we have. Or if you give the money to the Italian Sons and Daughters, the profits will be going towards good things like defending Columbus and keeping the statues up and all of that. So I think that's important that we trust our money with companies that aren't gonna turn around and potentially stab us in the back with some of their own, beliefs or whatever. So anyways, thanks again, Rafael, for this interview. I really enjoyed it, and I just really wanted to try to get the word out about some of these ugly myths that we hear about, or these lies that people propagate about Columbus. And do you have any final words for us?
Another one is Andy Dimino and the Italian American One Voice Coalition. I have worked with them a few times defending Columbus. And I have worked with other people, but it's just that I don't remember all of them right now.
Yeah.
And something about, when I wrote the books and stuff, as I said, there is a lot of passion in it. And it's because the lies against Columbus, they are bold lies. And that's why I felt the way that I felt when I was writing the books, because those lies are easy to debunk. They are easy to find. Anybody can find it. And I have people, even some. I have a mother who, she's homeschooled her kids, and she sent me an email and about her own blog about Columbus that she made herself, and she had not even read my books. And she was defending Columbus, saying the same things that I was saying. And it's because she did the same thing like me. She saw the claims and she started to read primary sources and see that the things that they were saying against Columbus are not true. So it's not difficult to find. It's just you have to take the time and see.
Right. Well, and I want to thank you for taking the time to do that, because of course a lot of people don't take the time to do that. But I think hopefully the intent of this video was just to get the word out about, the separating the facts from the fiction. All right, we're going to get going here. Once again, Rafael, thank you so much. Maybe we'll have you on a month or two. God bless. Godspeed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
See ya.